Hey everyone, you're listening to episode number 50. Today's episode is quite intriguing. I get to talk to Rebekah LaRobardiere, relationship and certified sex coach. We talk about how to get what you want in the bedroom and how to talk to your kids about sex. I know it's scary, but sex is a big, huge deal in our society. Sex sells. Sex is naughty and secretive, but with all that's going on in the world, this is so super important to me. We must be our children's educators, so they know what's inappropriate when someone else approaches them. And it never hurts to get more comfortable talking about it with our spouse either. After all, we're supposed to do this with them for the rest of forever, God willing. So let's get what we want, ladies. Are you ready to hear what Rebekah has to say? Let's dive in. You're listening to the Live with Audacity podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Stewart. Audacity is defined by Merriam-Webster as intrepid boldness or disregard for normal constraints. And that's exactly what we have here. The Live with Audacity podcast is aimed at giving you the courage to explore your someday dreams, do things your way, and start making things happen in your life right now. I'm a mama of 4 kiddos ranging from college student to kindergartner, wife to a high school football and track coach, and a multi-passionate entrepreneur. Together with my guests, we're going to teach you how to live with audacity and intentionality, discover and utilize your unique skills and talents, and step into who you are meant to be in order to make your someday dreams a reality. Are you ready? Here we go. Thank you so much for tuning back into the Live with Audacity podcast. I'm really excited about today's episode, and I'm going to have to start finding a different adjective to describe my excitement about these episodes. But I'm so blessed that I get to talk to so many incredible, amazing, beautiful women and men. But today I get to talk to Rebekah. Rebekah, welcome to the show, and tell me how you pronounce your last name.
Thank you, Melissa. It is LaRobardiere.
And is that French?
It is French, yes.
So maybe that's why you're so good at this particular topic. Guys, I'm so excited to talk to Rebekah today because we get to talk about sex. And if you have kids in the car, pause and listen to this later. Because, sometimes people just aren't ready to have those conversations with their kids just yet. But I'm so excited to talk to you. First off, tell us how in the world you came to this place and why this is such a passionate work for you.
So it's kind of a long story, and I'll put it in a nutshell. I grew up in a conservative Christian home, and I realized sex was not a huge topic of conversation, but I also realized it was not one that we were not allowed to talk about. It just wasn't talked about. And then when I met Sam, who is my husband, we dated, and he was my first boyfriend ever because I was the type of person, or am the type of person, that didn't want to waste my time or energy on frivolous relationships. And so when I met him, I was originally determined to never get married. I was going to be a missionary and take on the world alone.
I love that.
And he wooed me really well. And when I had this belief that if you did everything right, that you were told, you stay pure, you do everything within this construct of rightness, of purity, then you're going to have an amazing sex life and your honeymoon will be phenomenal. And that was not the case.
I was just about to say, and how'd that work out for you?
It did not work out very well. And so when we got home a week later, I realized that this was not okay with me. And I had a desire to share my experience and my process with people. And I think one of the main things was just lack of education that was good education. We have lots of information about sex floating around Hollywood,
Oh,
Cosmo,
yeah.
everything. Sex is not a topic that is not talked about, but we are not given the tools to talk about it in a healthy manner, or what are realistic expectations, because what you see in movies or what you've seen is not reality. And so this has been a process for me, and I have such a huge passion and desire to thrive in this area. And I love sex and I love my husband, and I want everyone else to experience the same opportunities to fulfill their desire to have a thriving sex life.
I love that so much. And I love that you pointed out that you said, you felt like if you did everything right and you were pure and all this stuff, that you would just naturally have a sex life, which really brings out the lesson in life, right? That not everything the first time you do it is so easy. And, we're not always good at everything that we do the very first time. So tell me a little bit about, how you help people figure out what they really want.
So when people come to see me, it normally stems from lack of desire. And with that, there's a lot that plays into it. What did you ever have desire? Did you let desire go? I don't I believe that you can just lose desire. I believe it's an intentional lack of focus, an intentional pushing away to lose a desire that you once had that was extremely strong. Because when you start dating and you get engaged, you have this sexual desire, and your body and your hormones, everything's working towards something, connection.
Yeah.
And so when you lose that desire, life happens. And I'm not saying that if you've lost desire, then you're doing it wrong. I'm saying that if you lose desire, the intentionality that once was there is no longer there. Which, when you get married, you have children, you buy a house, you get jobs, and life happens, and you shift your focus to life instead of just that connection.
I agree. It's so hard, especially, being new parents, and trying to work out all the kinks and how you manage, your new baby, and figuring out who does what, and, how to do the things. I think it's very, very, very simple, especially at the beginning. Everyone is tired and just trying to figure it out and not die. That we do get in that survival mode, that it can help what's the word I'm looking for? It really does start to slip away, that we focus and are intentional about that. So I love that you pointed that out.
Yeah. And there are a lot of things that play into it. Stress of a new baby, the healing process, and then you lose a lot of the capacity because it gets focused on something else. And it's not a bad thing. It's just, as long as it's not a focus, it gets put on the back burner. So just keeping the relationship and the connection aspect a priority is huge. Also, there's a lot of times that I have people that don't really even like their spouse anymore. And so you have to deal with the trust or the hurt or the pain, or you get the trauma that they've been triggered in the bedroom, or even just in the relationship from past situations, either with their spouse or with previous people. And so I help people shift their perspectives and change their thought patterns.
Okay, so how do the things that we go through with our spouse let's just say even just, regular everyday occurrences of, bickering and trying to communicate and learn how to communicate together and, all of those things, how do those affect our time in the bedroom?
So if we are bickering with our spouse, it is normally because we are defensive or trying to prove a point. And so when we feel defensive or feel or believe that we are being misunderstood, it is hard to want to be vulnerable and expose yourself in a way that you are allowing someone to have access to bring you great pain or great pleasure. And if you don't feel confident in the normal everyday life situations or conversations, exposing your most intimate, vulnerable areas is a lot more difficult when you don't believe that you are protected emotionally, physically, in a vulnerable way. So it's hard to open up.
Yeah. And yeah, it's hard for you to set that. It's hard to set that aside in your brain, right? It's hard to compartmentalize, your fights with, being open and vulnerable with your partner when it comes to sex.
Absolutely. And there are some people want to just have sex just for the fun of it. It helps relieve stress. There are so many health benefits, endorphins, everything. It's great. And at the same time, there's also the intimacy aspect that if you want that, it is more vulnerable because you are giving yourself to someone to be able to see all of you, to be able to have access to the deepest parts of who you are.
How in the world can we keep sex fun?
So it is all about perspective, in my opinion, because you can make anything fun if you choose to. So it's going in with the mindset that I get to have fun instead of I have to do this. I have found that women, especially if they have grown up in the church, they believe it's their duty to take care of their husbands, to do this, and it is more about the husband and bringing him pleasure than it is about the connection or the woman.
Right.
And so realizing that this actually gets to be something fun we do together, and it does not have to be perfect. Perfection does not have a place in, I would say, in the realm of sex and exploration with your spouse. There is no need for
really.
perfection. It's true. Exactly. But there are those people that love things to be perfect, and I am very far from a perfectionist. So
me too. That's funny.
So I would say allowing yourself to embrace the process and the mess and the ups and downs of the experience is what creates the fun. And switch it up sometimes. The bedroom is not the only place to have sex. Do something a little adventurous. Keep adventure in it where you would be like, oh no, I couldn't do that. But get the thrill going.
Yeah, I love that you said keep the adventure. That can be really hard when you have a family. What are some tips and tricks to help us keep that spark alive, even when we can't necessarily get together right now?
So I have had this realization that a lot of times we like to wear hats as women. I've got my mom hat, I've got the wife hat, I've got the businesswoman hat. And I've got my sexy hat, and we just compartmentalize everything and forget that we are a fluid person and that there is no need to switch hats. Especially as a mom, we get to model for our children what a sexy, sensual woman is. I'm not saying they're having sex in front of children. I am saying, I wanted to specify
Please
and clarify that. Please do not. But allowing yourself to be a sexy, sensual wife and mother to model for your children shows them that the fun continues after the marriage, because in movies all the fun leads up to the wedding, and then after the wedding it becomes ho-hum, mundane, and boring, and you don't see the physical affection, you don't see the flirting, you don't see that the connection can stay alive even with your children there. So have longer embraces, flirt with your spouse in the kitchen, making dinner, and allow your children to see the affection between the parents so that they grow up and actually have a healthier perspective of what romance and marriage and sexuality actually looks like. And you're not taking off your mom hat to be a wife. You get to be both and at the same time.
That is so powerful. I love that you said no need to switch hats, because that is, you're totally, completely right. We compartmentalize that so easily. And, we leave work and take off our work hat, and then we put on our mom hat and we drive kids around, and then we come home and, we still are, family, mom, wife, whatever. And then we feel like, okay, now when I go to the bedroom, now I can put on my wife hat. But by then we're so tired and we don't want to have to put on a new hat. So I love that you said, keep that spark alive and make sure that you are paying attention and showing your spouse that attention during the day, because then it doesn't feel like such a chore, right? Like I can't be that person right now. I'll do that later. And then, when we put things off like that and we come back to it later, the thrill is kind of gone, right? Like our enthusiasm about it is kind of gone.
Absolutely. And it creates the foreplay that people think has to start 5, 10, 30 minutes before you actually have sex. But it actually cultivates and creates the anticipation all throughout the day and keeps you almost in the mood and reminding yourself of what you love about your spouse, instead of it having to be on the to-do list, which I love to put that on my to-do list because I love to cross things off my to-do list. So I'll write my husband's name on my to-do list because it's fun for me. But on the same hand, some people just feel like it is just another thing I have to do and I have to take care of someone else. And it's not about them. It's about the other person. Instead of making it about the connection, I get to have time with my husband. I get to have sex. And whatever that looks like, I get to be intimate with them. And it's not a chore unless your perspective is it's a chore.
Yeah. How can we get really good about getting in alignment with how we think about sex? And, because you've referenced movies several times. And so when we grow up watching these movies about romance and, sex scenes and things like that, we get kind of this story that's put in our head about how things are supposed to be. And then I feel like sometimes we start to feel guilty that it's not like it is in the movies. So how do we get in alignment with what we actually really authentically want out of our sex life, rather than just move forward with the way things we think are, air quotes, supposed to be?
Yeah. That's a great question. I think a lot of it has to do with being curious about yourself and your partner and being willing to ask the questions, because sex is one of those things we most of us are really excited about before the wedding, but we don't actually talk about it and plan. Okay, let's talk about our expectations for the wedding night or the honeymoon. And you go in and you both have this preconceived idea and believing that you're on the same page when you've actually never discussed it. And so allowing sex to be a topic of conversation that is fluid and open and willing to be curious about, to keep the tension between this is a safe place, but also adding the adventure that keeps a little bit of the risk and the thrill in it, is a big deal. To be able to continue to talk and figure out, okay, what do I want? Because most of us don't ask ourselves, what do we want? We just assume, oh, I want a good, healthy sex life. But you've never broken down what that actually is. And so when people come to see me, they say they want a thriving sex life. I said, okay, so what does that look like? They're like, I don't know. It's like, okay, so that's the homework. Figure out what that looks like for you. And there are no shoulds and there's no comparisons, because you may want to do it every other day and then the next couple twice a week or once a week. And it is okay if your goal is connection.
I love that. I love that you said we have to figure out what a healthy sex life looks like to us. I know as women, we talk all the time with our girlfriends about, kind of the things that we go through. And sex is oftentimes a topic of discussion. So it's interesting to see different people's perspective and know that we all have different expectations. What do you do if your expectations are different from your spouse?
So that's where really good communication comes in. And
Yes.
it can be a struggle, because if one person has a higher desire than the other, and the one is pursuing and the other says, not now, I don't feel like it, I've tired, blah, blah, blah. You can come up with all of the excuses. And we don't always explain, hey, I've had a really rough day and I would love to connect with you, but I feel like it is a chore because I've been taking care of everyone all day. We don't use all the words. We just shut it down instead of saying, hey, I love and appreciate that you actually want to connect with me. I'm not in the mood, but if you want to get me in the mood, I'm willing. Or say, hey, I would love to take care of you, because that's always an option. And just using all the words instead of the short yes, no, I don't feel like it, but expound and be vulnerable back, because otherwise it becomes a value statement or a rejection to the other person. And so they shut down, they start believing they're not desirable, they're not worth it. And so opening the conversation for what's really going on, and maybe they just don't feel connected. They've had a rough day. They need a real conversation to be understood, to be heard. And once that connection happens, sometimes sex will just happen.
I love that. Oh my gosh, this is so good, because I think, oh man, this has been such a theme kind of in my calls lately, is that honest and open communication is the key to really not just air quote connecting in a sexual way, but in all manners with people in our relationships. And so I think it's very, very important to point out that this is just another place where you need that honest, open, loving communication so that y'all can get on the same page as far as, because a lot of times a woman mostly will say, I'm just not in the mood, or I don't feel sexy, or whatever. And like you said, the spouse can take it as, oh, so she just isn't into me, or, whatever.
Yeah.
And so I think, being really open and honest about it. I love that you said that I can, I'm not in the mood, but I'm happy to take care of you because it's just not really something I'm into right now. How do we get on the same page? We kind of talked a little bit about incompatible sex drives, but like, how do we open that door of communication, especially if you were both kind of brought up in a really ultra conservative home where you didn't really talk about that stuff, or if you did talk about it, it was kind of like silly talk. How do you open that communication with your spouse to really be like a serious conversation, but also keep it light and fun because you get to talk about sex?
Yeah. That's again, great question, because when by the time people actually get to talk about their incompatibilities, there has normally already been built up frustration and hurt and rejection. And so now it's no longer fun. The defenses are up, the walls are up, and I'm going to lose if I don't get what I want. It's a win-lose situation or a lose-lose situation. And the goal is for a win-win. And so being able to broach that subject in a way that does not point fingers or place judgment or value statements on the other person's desire or lack thereof is a big deal. And
Tell me about a value statement and how that works. Like, explain that a little bit more.
So a value statement, you could say, if one person pursues often, and so let's be stereotypical, that let's say the husband is pursuing the wife and he is used to getting a no. So, and then the wife is like, all he ever wants is sex. And it's not really the case. It is like a child asking for a cookie. The more they ask, it ups their chances of actually getting a yes.
I love that.
Right?
That's hilarious.
So if you start with an openness and a willingness to engage instead of saying no, 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 then the need and the desire will be met without the tension and the conflict and the value statement story that we create about ourselves, that I'm undesirable, they don't want me. And then you create all of these stories to protect yourself from the person that you're actually trying to open up to.
Yeah, you got it. You are hitting the nail on the head. Why do you think women resist more than we really want to?
So I have a couple theories on this. And one is that our society has told us that we need to be like men. We need to be able to do things like men. We need to be able to get the tasks done. And our value lies in our accomplishments and our to-do lists and check everything off. And so we shut down our emotions because we're told we're too emotional. We shut down our pleasure because if we allow pleasure, then we're also allowing pain in our life. So we just shut down a lot of our feminine qualities. And in doing that, we shut down our desire. And so because we become task oriented and we have to clean the house, we have to feed the kids, we have to do this, we have to work, and now we have to do this too, we've put everything in a task box opposed to the relationship box. And so my theory is that we've shut down a lot of our feminine side to allow ourselves to be equal to a man when we are wired differently. And so we don't know how to merge the two well, and it hasn't been modeled to us because it is one extreme or another.
Wow. That is so powerful. I'm just sitting here, my brain's kind of exploding because I've never really thought about it that way. Do you think that any of it has to do with us women not wanting to release that control and kind of like not give our power away? Because I don't think it's really that once you once you get on the same page and you can be open and honest about your expectations and what you want and things like that. But do you feel like because of our society and the way that um it's always kind of been shown that we are um property or owned or, kind of controlled, that it's hard for us to release that control and let somebody into those vulnerable places?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I see that very often, that we are afraid to let go of the control, partially because we don't believe that we are valuable enough to be loved and given that pleasure by someone else, because we allow others to value us to the extent that we value ourselves. And in doing that, we don't want to give someone else the control because it exposes us. And in the exposure, we've lost control because they can use something against us. Not that they would, but we don't value ourselves enough or believe that we are worth it, especially because society, media says that we are property and we are sexual beings for the taking, opposed to we get to be in control of our sexual desires and our needs. And it is, yes, a sharing of control. It is not one or the other. And that's what we're afraid of. If we let go and release control, we will never get it back.
Ooh, man, that is so good. Oh my gosh, so many good things coming out of this call. It's insane. I'm so glad I get to have you here. Okay, tell us, how do we talk to our kids about sex? Do you talk at all about that? Do you help people with that?
I do. I have 3 children, and my goal is that they have a healthy perspective of what sex and sexuality is and what it looks like. I want to make sure that they are informed and that I and my husband are the first to give them the information, so that when they hear things at school or outside of our bubble, that they are able to weigh it, measure it, ask the questions, and say, yes, I'll take that, and I believe that, or no, I don't. And so there's an appropriate level of information that you give at certain ages, because there's a, so people believe that innocence and purity are the same, and I don't. I think to be innocent, they don't want to expose children to anything because they don't want to lose their innocence or their purity. And my thought is, innocence, no, purity is giving the appropriate information at the appropriate time to the level of them being able to handle it. And they still stay innocent and they still stay pure. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah,
And
totally.
And so all 3 of our children, so we have a 12, 10, and 9-year-old, and all 3 of them have had the sex talk. They all know what I do and that I am a sex coach. And I was actually talking to them this morning. I was like, how do you feel about me being a sex coach? And our 12-year-old, she's like, I love it. I said, why do you love it? She's like, because I love that you actually get to do something that you love to do, that you get to help
Oh,
people. And which was just fun, and to hear her perspective. And she knows what I do, but there's this level of, she knows there's a lot that she doesn't know, and that in her time she gets to ask, and it is an open, fluid conversation. There are times that we sit at the dinner table and my children will ask questions, and we don't laugh about it, but there can be some funny conversations because at times sex is funny. But at the level that they're at, it's just a curiosity, and I don't want to squelch their curiosity. I don't want to squash it. I don't want to put shame on it because
Yeah.
it has been. And shame comes from fear and control, because if you let people explore or be curious, then you lose control of what they ask. You lose control of where they might wander and what they might want to know or see.
Yes, I think that's so valuable to point out, is that your kids are going to be curious no matter what, right? Like, no matter what. So it's best if they get the information from you rather than outside of you. And I know it's so uncomfortable for us to have those conversations, and it's I think the thing that holds me back from talking more about it to my kids is that I'm nervous about what they're going to go and talk to their friends about, right? And I don't want to be accused, I don't want to be looked at as the parent that's giving all the information that
Yeah.
they're going off and talking to their friends about, and then, get the call that, what are you doing? My kid doesn't know any, and so that's hard to be that person in the middle. It's kind of like
Mm-hmm.
telling your kids about Santa Claus or whatever. it's
Yep.
scary. So how do we approach that, and how do you decide? Do you tell your kids like, hey, I would love to talk to you about this, but I think we need to wait a little bit longer until you're a little bit older so that I can explain it really well and you'll understand? Like, how do you balance that?
So I'll touch on the little part about being the parent that tells their children. And I told and continue to tell my children that this is not a topic that they discuss with their friends, because it was important for me to be the one to tell you, as in my children or
Mm-hmm.
my husband. It was important for us to be the first ones to talk to you about it. And so what we share with you is for you right now, and it is up to the other parents to inform their children. This is
Yeah.
something it is sacred, it is special, but it is natural. It is part of life. And so allowing it to be not a secret, but there is a value that's held, that it's not just flippantly talked about.
I love that. I love that so much. And so
And
how do you balance that, about that age thing, and telling them what, like, do you just answer any questions for them?
yes and no. I will answer. I try not to say, oh, when you grow up or when you get older. I try not to say that, because I hated hearing that when I was younger.
Yep.
Because as they become more and more curious, I don't want them to think like, oh, they're not going to answer it anyways. So there is always a way to answer, or at least redirect the question that you're actually believe they are asking.
Okay.
So redirect them to something that is age appropriate, or give them a short little bit about what they're curious about. Because if you don't answer it and you push it and say, oh, later, they will probably not just say, okay, fine, I don't need to know right now.
Right.
With you saying, oh, when you get older, you get to know, it's going to pique the curiosity even more, that they potentially will go find a friend to answer the question, and it won't be an answer that you like. So being able to be honest that, hey, this is part, but there are things that are not appropriate for you at this time. And when that time comes, I am happy to share with you, but this is what I'm willing to give you right now.
Yeah. How do we know what's age appropriate? Is there like a chart or a list?
I would say it depends on your child's maturity, because you don't want to, if one child is 6 years old and starts asking questions, you give them a little bit, but then you have a 10-year-old that could care less, doesn't want to know anything. Like, you gauge
Yeah.
where they're at and their curiosity level and allow it to be a fluid conversation. Like, you bring it up first. You talk about sex and, with animals, or if you've got cats or a farm, whatever. Children get to know about the natural process of life. And that is great, because then as they grow, they'll start having more questions. And if they want to know how babies are made, tell them, but you don't have to go into graphic detail. Right?
Yeah, totally. Oh my gosh, that's so great.
So that's kind of how I try to gauge it, is what is their level of comfort with this topic right now? And
Yeah.
my older two are more comfortable than our youngest. And he loves that I do what I do, but he's like, yeah, sometimes it makes me feel awkward. I was like, why? He's like, I don't know, just hearing about that you talk about sex. Like, he doesn't listen to my conversations, but he
Right.
knows how babies are made. And so it's just one of those things he's not comfortable discussing or hearing about. And that is great. And so we keep that as the gauge.
I love that you are so respectful of his wishes in that department, instead of being like, well, it's natural and it's fine and it's no big deal and you need to get over it. It's like, okay, cool. You're not comfortable. No big deal. I respect that. And I think that's beautiful. If you don't mind sharing, what's the craziest question you've gotten from either a client or your kids or someone?
Craziest question. Well, I think the one that surprised me most, just because I have been in both the Christian and the secular world doing this, is God okay with sex? And that one kind of took me by surprise, because I was like, he created it. Like, and women have parts that are designed only for pleasure. Of course, God's good with sex, but because it's so normal and comfortable for me, I forget that that's not everyone's grid. That's not how people were taught, or even anywhere on their grid of perspective that God is for it.
Right.
And so that
Yes.
one took me by surprise. It takes a lot to surprise me and shock me. And
I
so
bet.
I'm trying to think of, have I been surprised?
No, I think that's great though, is focusing on is that topic is it okay to have sex? Is God okay with sex? And I think a lot of times, because we start to learn things so early and so young that I know I have a 5-year-old daughter, and it totally freaks me out when her brothers are talking about, boobs or balls and wieners or, whatever. And then, so then she's starting to say it, and it's like, oh gosh, like, I don't know how to handle this right now. And it's, you don't want them out in public talking like that. And, so it's just, it's hard to wrap your arms around the whole thing and figure out what's okay, what's appropriate, and what's not appropriate, and things like that. So this has been hugely helpful for me.
Oh, good. Yeah, and it's funny because everyone has a different level of comfortability, and it stems from how we were raised and belief systems or perspectives, or breaking out of what we've come from, and we go extremes. It is learning to be comfortable with potentially the uncomfortable, the embracing what is unknown and we don't know how to handle it. So lean into it and say, okay, this isn't bad. And why do I cringe? Why am I uncomfortable with my children saying boobs and wieners out in public? And figuring out for us why it makes this uncomfortable. Is it because growing up it wasn't allowed? Is it because you want it to be respected? It is sacred. It is, but also it is a part of our anatomy, and it's like a finger, and it's like a toe.
Yeah.
And so trying to figure out why we are uncomfortable and lean into that. And I'm not saying one way or another is right or wrong, but it's owning your choices and your comfortability.
Yeah, I think that's huge to point out too, right? Is it all comes back to, why is this making me uncomfortable? Where did this come from? What stories have I been told or that I've made up even in my own head about sex, and why it's shameful, or it's, shameful to talk about in public, or, whatever it may be that you're struggling with. I think it's very important to go back to essentially the drawing board and say, now where did this come from? Why is this here? Why do I feel like that? So good. Okay, so let's dive into a quick rapid fire. What is a book, article, person, or talk that's changed your life?
So I have 3 authors that have stood out to me in the last 2 years. One is Jordan Peterson, Esther Perel, and Brene Brown. And
yeah,
they have been instrumental in helping me broaden my perspective, to hone in on why and what I believe, and then just allowing the risk and the unknown to be okay.
Yeah, that's so valuable. Oh, this is so good. Okay, what is your favorite Friday night at home?
My favorite Friday night is having a spontaneous friend over for dinner, and they're my guinea pigs. I love to cook, and I do not like to do repeat meals. So I'll have company over, and you never know. Is it going to be good or is it not? And have wine and good conversation. And then when they leave, ideally have sex with my husband.
I love it.
That would
so
be
much.
perfect. That would be a perfect Friday night.
That is beautiful. I love that so much. Okay, what did you want to be as a kid? What was your dream job?
So I wanted to be a missionary, a doctor, or like Amy Carmichael, Harriet Tubman, or Corrie ten Boom. I like risk, and I don't play it safe. And so I wanted to do something wild and crazy.
Oh, that's so cool.
Like those women. I was going to be in the Underground Railroad, and
That's so awesome. I love that. Okay, what is your next vacation that you're planning?
Well, with the whole quarantine, all plans are on hold. But we are talking about planning a family vacation. We love to camp, and so contemplating a backpacking trip. My ideal is somewhere tropical. I love hot weather. I love the sun. And so anywhere that it's warm and sunny, I'm happy.
Yes. Well, you are welcome to come to Texas and hang out with me in the hot sunshine in Canyon Lake, and we can just enjoy the sunshine and the water, and it would be so beautiful.
That would be perfect.
Right? I think it would be so much fun. We'd have so much to talk about. Okay. What's your best advice to help our listeners live with audacity?
I would say stay curious and be intentional. Keep the topic of sex and sexuality a fluid conversation, to not shy away from discomfort.
Yes, I think that's so good, because we do, right? When things get uncomfortable, we're like, well, I'll just be in my bed hiding under the covers.
Yep.
But if we can face it and really have that difficult, hard conversation, man, there's so much beautiful stuff on the other side of those conversations. Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
Where can people find you to get more information about your services and what you do?
So right now, email is the way to contact me, and that's Rebekah, rebekah.pdc@gmail.com. And hopefully soon my website will be launched, and Facebook and Instagram. Hopefully.
And do you have a name picked out?
I do. It's rjlcoaching.com, and it's actually almost done. I'm just need to risk it and put myself out there and hit the submit and launch it.
You got this. People are going to be so happy to find someone that can help them overcome this, because I know it's a big deal, and it's a what's the word I'm looking for? It's a pandemic in our marriages, and we need the help. So I can't wait to see you launch it and get it out there and get more people to get your help. Thank you so much for being here. This has been so informative, and I hope that people walk away with some tools in their tool belt, and that they can really start to have those tough conversations with either their kids or their spouse, so that they can have a beautiful life that they love and enjoy with them.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. This was so fun. I enjoyed it.
Me too. Hey y'all, I had to jump in here real quick because I need a favor. If you are loving the Live with Audacity podcast, I need you to do me a big solid favor and share it with your friends, share it on social media, and go to the Apple iTunes link and click subscribe, rate it, review it. I need to know your feedback, and I want to keep putting this out for you, so I really need your help to get the message out. Thank you so much for your loyalty and your super kind and sweet words. They mean so